Hi to all Visegrad Inside podcast listeners. My name is Maria Repko. I am Deputy Director for the Center for Economic Strategy. It's Kyiv-based think tank, and I'm happy to be here with Wojciech discussing Ukrainian economy, defense economy, and how does my country cope with the war and hardships. Thank you, Poland.
Welcome to the Visegrad Inside podcast.
We bring you global experts on the future of democracy, security, and economy.
The leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Hosted by editors of Visegrad Insight.
Powered by Respublika Foundation from Warsaw, Poland.
It's Monday, 9th of February. My name is Wojciech Przybylski and I'm sitting in Warsaw with Maria Repko, Deputy Director of Center for Economic Strategy, a think tank based in Kyiv. Maria is traveling across Poland, like many Ukrainians, and she comes from an organization that is, I would say, one of the leading independent think tanks that provide an outlook for economic perspectives of Ukraine in the future. We're going to talk about forecasts and monitors continuously the developments related to economic prosperity, economic security and hardships, especially during the times of war. Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Wojciech. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure all mine. And I'm sure our listeners appreciate and will appreciate your account of coming just from Kyiv, how it is to survive this winter. It's minus 20 or even more during the night, minus 20 degrees Celsius. And I guess I can't even imagine how it is to survive as an adult male in such conditions. And there are much more vulnerable people who are in the city.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very big problem, especially for those who are of age or those vulnerable people who don't have enough money to buy let's say the EcoFlow, which is the charger, or let's say the gas heater, which you need to heat your apartment while the central heating does not work. One of our biggest central heating plants was, I think, destroyed just to the ground, and a lot of apartment buildings are now without heating at all. Our relatives are just struggling to heat their apartments with the pots of hot water, with hot stones on the gas stoves or on the gas heaters, but it does not help much. The electricity in Kyiv apartments is there, I think, for 2 hours per day or 4 hours per day, depending on how lucky a person are, and this is actually really difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is extremely difficult. It is extremely inhumane for the attackers, essentially to conduct terrorist action against Ukraine, despite calls not just from general public opinion and the leaders of Europe, but also from the American leader who claimed he got a promise from Mr. Putin that such attacks will stop. Nothing of that sort has happened. And we know that all our effort in Europe to be safe of Russian aggression, Russian attack, depends largely on Ukrainian resilience, not just on the war front lines, but especially this winter in the middle of these cities, where people hold on to whatever heat there is, and as you just described, find individual strategies how to handle themselves.
The thing is that we don't like the word resilience anymore. It's already 5th year into the war, and Ukrainians just got really tired of being resilient. This is not how a person is supposed to live, right? The like very small lady who works as the nail artist now knows how to start a diesel generator amidst winter and minus 20 degrees Celsius. She's not supposed to know that. She's not supposed to live in a dark and cold house. The grandma is supposed to, I don't know, doing gardening and not, staying under her beds because she just cannot go outside. This is not about the resilience. This is about genocide and about very, very hard situation, which should not be accepted as a new norm. That's probably...
You use big words, and I would only underline how important this framing is. Remembering history, remembering how Soviet Russia has conducted a genocide of different proportion without Europe watching, without Europe's support and solidarity, and the West turning away their eyes from the genocide of Holodomor. That was, almost 100 years ago, well, nearly a century ago, and then repeats itself, the same instincts. But fortunately, I would say, Ukraine is not alone. And I wanted now to turn the page to some political events and prospects. We want to talk briefly about the visit of Mr. Tusk and representatives of the Polish government. The visit took place only last week, and Prime Minister of Poland met with both President Zelensky and the Prime Minister Swiarenko. When they discussed several issues, they discussed the context of the ongoing support for Ukraine in terms of military support that is co-financed also by the European Union funds, energy transfers that Poland has initiated with the US purchase LNG delivered from the Baltic Sea, from the LNG ports to the hub in Lviv and then further to Ukraine. Number of other issues were touched, including the transfer of military technology. While Ukraine requires weaponry systems, MiG jet fighters, Poland is also expecting some technology transfer from cutting-edge and battle-tested drone protection, for instance, and prospects of new cooperation and using, again, European funds from the SAFE mechanism to build up common common, not just position, but common defense industry and common defense projects that are of key importance both to Ukraine and to Poland. All of that seems like extremely packed agenda, and frankly speaking, it also opens up the eyes of what's potentially coming for the future. This is completely new phase also of the bilateral relationship between Poland and Ukraine. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so, because actually the link where I read the news about Tusk, it also stated that, okay, there is the end of the emotional period and the start of something rational. And I think that this rational, it's not completely new. It was building up for a couple of years already as Poland became a huge logistical hub. And actually, it was also good not just for support to Ukraine and for Ukraine's resilience, but also for Polish economy and also for Poland's role as the EU actor who is, supporting the peace in the region and maybe speaking even broader than just Ukraine. This is also very important as the Visegrad region, as the Three Seas region, and so on. So I think that Poland's role has and should continue to be kind of reflected upon, thought upon, and it's very important. And Ukraine is really happy to have this ally, and this I'm saying as person very much supporting Poland as well. So about the military collaboration and SAFE, again, I'm very happy that the European Union has finally opened to the opportunity of funding the large-scale military industry development projects. Right before, the US has kind of withdrawn its support to the European Union militarily. it's very important for the EU to start funding its own defense, which was not the case, right? And now it's it just starts, and we are again happy that Ukraine was allowed to be a piece of these safe mechanisms. So they specifically said that, and they specifically stated Ukraine's eligibility, which is important because Ukraine's defense industry, I think it's currently the one which maybe outperforms a lot of the other countries' industries, even despite the war and despite the previous technological advancements in the other economies. Ukrainians have the sad but efficient opportunity to battle test everything, which is important. Ukrainians are working on the weapons not just as the mean to, let's say, earn the money, but also as a mean to defend their homeland and their loved ones. And the third reason is, generally speaking, defense industries have usually been clients for defense procurement agencies, the governments, right? And in Ukraine, the situation is not really like this. The main client is the soldier on the battlefield. So even if the procurement is centralized, the main client for your drone or for your anti-drone or for whatever it is you are developing is the soldier, is the brigade, is the commander of the brigade, and you have immediate feedback. That's very important for any military R&D. And I think that, the defense industry and in Ukraine, in Poland, and the other countries, this is the first candidate for collaboration.
Hi, if you're enjoying this episode, why not subscribe to Visegrad Insight? This gives you access to all our latest content online, as well as to our live and online events. You can use our special promo code for Visegrad Insight podcast listeners to get 35% off. Just go to visegradinsight.eu, choose a yearly subscription, and apply code Visegrad35. And now, back to the podcast.
Let's move from military industry to the economy and the forecast for the Ukraine economy in a moment. I will just add a note on the meeting that just took place in Kyiv, the meeting between Poland and Ukraine, preparing also not these sectoral topics, but planning for a comprehensive agreement that we might expect between Poland and Ukraine. One of many bilateral agreements Ukraine has been also signing with a number of countries, and Poland has been signing with a number of countries. Also this year expected a bilateral agreement between Poland and Germany, Poland and the UK. Last year, the Treaty of Nancy between Poland and France draw quite a lot of attention, also because of this new security and military dimension. And all of that diplomatic effort will apparently be concentrating around the big event this year, which is the Ukraine Recovery Conference. So before we go to the economic forecast on Ukraine, could you tell, because I think you've been attending the previous editions of the Ukraine Recovery Conference, what's the importance of that conference, how it has been evolving, changing in the past, what to expect this year from the event that will be hosted by and organized by Poland in June, at the end of June in Gdańsk?
Yeah, it's very interesting how would Poland do this, and Gdańsk is one of my favorite cities in the world, so I believe that it would be nice. I have indeed attended the events in Berlin and in Rome, and I would say that every country brings something special, brings something of its own, right? The important thing is that the different stakeholders are able to meet and greet and discuss the topics within these pillars, within the different pillars. And indeed, this scale of the conference, which is really big, it allows you to meet a lot of people, and it allows a lot of fruitful collaborations to be born, right, in this very big and welcoming usually space. Important thing, just organization-wise, is that when you have something that big, you might really, think through all the little and kind of unimportant details which then become important. So it's a big job to host a conference like that. So I wish Gdańsk and I wish Poland all the success. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll see some important people behind steering wheels. We have people in different ministries responsible for several sectors of the conference. A new pillar in the stream of these conferences is going to be defense, the so-called fifth pillar. But overall, we expect that business will be a business-driven event, focusing on recovery, but focusing on investing in Ukraine economy right now. So this is the best moment to touch base on the forecast and the situation. It seems like when you are under such heavy attack, you would not expect economy to do very well. What's your take on how Ukraine, in terms of economy, is performing?
The thing is that, the situation is really very, very fluid, right? So a lot depends on the attacks and on the situation on the front. So that's why for us, the most important support from the European Union and from the global leaders, including the US, in economic terms would be not money, but closing the sky. Because there is not enough money to compensate for a lost generation or lost heating systems and so on. So this is important. What's important is prevention. More F-16s, more anti-aircraft missiles, which we desperately lack, for example, for Patriots, right? This should not be in the deficit because, why do we talk about recovery if we can do at least the prevention? This is what's important if we want to talk less about, recovery needs and these RDNA estimations of some crazy hundreds of billions. Let's just close the sky. Let's just protect what we already have, what infrastructure Ukraine already has. That's important part. And economically speaking, before the recent shelling, before the recent attacks, the forecasts were, I would say, reserved. The GDP growth was expected at 2%. Inflation was expected to go down. And the monetary reserves of the National Bank, they stand at historically high levels. So basically, the situation was not, let's say, threatening in economic terms because of course, the huge Western support in financial terms as well as in military. Now, financially, we had this very interesting discussion of for example, with Belgium on the Russian assets, on usage of the 200 billions of funds which Russian central bank keeps in a Belgium depository Euroclear. Unfortunately, Ukraine and those advocating for usage of these funds did not show success. So these funds still remain immobilized in the Euroclear accounts.
Mostly Euroclear, because some of them
yes.
are in France and Germany as well. But yeah,
if
overall,
talking about numbers, there are some money in Japan, some money in the US, 180, I think, in Euroclear. The thing is actually what is fun. No one really publishes where this money are, and this is one of the points for advocacy for I think everyone who is thinking or touching bases upon the Ukrainian funding. Show us where the money are, because there is no official account for that. That's very interesting. Why is it so secretly kept?
Yeah.
So and then,
but let us not be distracted. Although this is a key element of the future support and also funding of the Ukrainian war effort, the European defense altogether. I would even argue more if I had an ear to the Belgian Prime Minister that depending on his action, that he either creates deterrence or an appeasement, not just for Russia, but for potential takeover of Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait, as the assets of other potential aggressors around the world would not be also under jeopardy should that happen. And hopefully it doesn't happen, but if that moves were considered, the type of response and the fierce response of European partners will tell and will dictate part of the logic of new aggressions around the world.
That's my point exactly. But we were told that Russia specifically threatened him physically, and the response of the free world was to keep Russian assets immobilized and not confiscated. This is, I think, even Ukraine will get the 90 billion euros as a loan, and this loan should not be repaid anytime soon. So financially, for 2 years, the country is more or less secure. But what is the message that Europe is sending? Is Europe a prey or is Europe a power? What is going on and what will going on?
That will be indeed a topic for much of our own talks in Wyszehradzka Republika, also the Europe Future Forum, to what extent we can keep the direction for Europe as a power. But in your voice, I hear and actually agree and write about it, Europe is not as much as a power as it likes to talk of itself. Back to Ukraine. What are the forecasts, given that there is an expected drop in financial support? You said in a moment ago that the support for Ukraine coming from different donors and financial backers of Ukraine are expected to decrease.
At the moment, we have this decision from the European Union on this loan to Ukraine. It's 90 billion, 30 billion will come as the budgetary support, and 60 more billion will come as a military support, which we very much welcome, because this is the most important economic support that Ukraine can get, as I already mentioned. For now, we feel that Ukraine is more or less secured, but it's also important for Ukraine to do its homework, because our internal discussion in Kyiv is at the moment on the additional revenue mobilization, which is also very hard. For example, the VAT introduction for the small entrepreneurs is discussed. So basically,
value-added tax.
The value-added tax. They had the benefit on the value-added tax payment. Now, the big discussion is, should they have these benefits? So even the small companies will have to become the VAT payers, and also a lot of other initiatives are on the table at the moment. Not just that, but a lot of Ukrainian reforms has to be seen through, which are part of the Ukraine plan developed and coordinated within the European Union Ukraine facility. So this is a lot of work, and the IMF and the European Union, they are all see that Ukraine reforms in anti-corruption, in economic governance, in fiscal capacity, in regional development. So this is all very important pillars, and we work on that,
And you help us understand how important they are also through the measurement of economic performance in the Ukraine's Economic Review 2025 that was published in the middle of January. Center for Economic Strategy, your think tank, notes the big numbers of Ukrainian economy. So the real GDP growth slowed to 2%. Still, that is way ahead of a number of European countries that would wish to have 2% GDP growth. Of course, there is there continues needs, and there is an influx of funding for specific sectors in the Ukrainian economy. There is an inflation that you already mentioned in our conversation that went below the targeted or expected 8%. So year to year, 8% for the war economy, that is really not bad overall, seeing things in perspective. And you mentioned that the reserves are increasing, actually. So Ukraine is more, I know you said you don't like the word resilience, but economically more resilient in many ways that you could imagine. Also, refugees outflow slowed in 2025 to 300,000 people per year. But there is a structure of the migration that is changing. Maybe we touch upon that at the end. And finally, one of the key points that your report mentions is that the state budget revenues grew by 21% nominally, but of course remain insufficient. Still, it is interesting for me, as someone who does not see it from very close, how is it possible that the revenues have been increasing? So, Maria, if you summarize this and refer to these two key points that again are more about human stories, why people to continue to leave, and what sort of people continue to leave now that there are some structural changes, as you observe in your report, but also what sort of revenues, new revenues, Ukrainian government is counting on, and what are the prospects of stabilizing public finances?
Let me maybe start with people. A lot of people who left in 2022, and maybe most of them did And those who stayed in Ukraine, they were really determined to stay for as long as it is possible. Also, the movement of the front line, it defines the number of the refugees, right? So then the front line was moving fastest in the beginning of the war, and now already for years, Putin is struggling to gain kilometer by kilometer. He is kind of crawling ahead, and the funds that Ukraine has are far not sufficient to stop that. But the line is moving slower. That's why less refugees. And one of the key structural changes was because boys of the age 18 plus to, I think, 18 to 23, they were allowed to leave Ukraine. So a lot of boys just left. Either it was tourism, or they went to visit their families, their mothers and sisters abroad, or it was also the immigration. Let's say they might, I think, go to Poland to enter the university and to get the education and so on. So for Europe, it's actually not the bad thing, because Ukrainian immigrants, they are easily integrating. They are mostly educated, and Europe, being demographically not in a very good place, is actually interested in getting more young people who has not the worst, let's say, school education, and have more or less European values as well.
You're so kind if you mention Polish educational system. Not too bad, yes. No, but frankly speaking, you're right, of course. And then on the sidelines of the visit to Kyiv, Donald Tusk mentioned also that Ukrainian war refugees are at the same time contributing to the Polish GDP by an estimate of 2.7 of Polish GDP, which is, given the size of the population, but also the hardships, that is really impressive. And it tells a completely different story, unknown from, I would say, 20th century altogether, how refugees are a workforce in European
In Poland,
partners.
there are a lot of IT hubs, right? So the IT companies just relocated their offices to Poznań, to Gdańsk, to Szczecin, to the other Polish cities, and a lot of the international companies has also relocated their headquarters from Kyiv to Warsaw, let's say. So this is, I think, something which did not surprise me very much, because it's young and really eager to work people. So they consume, they earn, and they contribute to the economy.
And now the counterintuitive fact. We have migration. We have the most productive, potentially most productive segments of the society, moving, as you described, to various locations, many of them in Poland. So how the revenues of the public finance are increasing in Ukraine? How do you maintain the state, which is a strategic objective?
That's the curious thing. First, is the revenues are moving together with the prices, right? And the price difference is not usually the same as the consumer price inflation. It's also depending on the producer price inflation. So that's the first thing. The component, which is called GDP deflator, it's usually higher than the consumer prices, so it contributes to the growth of the revenues. Then Ukraine has really widened the tax base. For example, it started to get the military tax from the salaries from these small entrepreneurs who before that were not eligible for paying this tax. So there was also this component, and I think that tax services are also trying to do their job maybe more, diligent than they were doing it before, because they face this money shortage. What's also important that banking profits, they were also taxed at a much higher rate than they used to tax before the war. The situation is the following: the banks did not do a lot of corporate lending as they used to before war and as they are doing in Europe. But instead, they resorted to the less risky asset, buying the government bonds or investing into the deposit certificates of the National Bank of Ukraine. Basically, with the high interest rate on these instruments, banks are gaining a lot of profits without virtually any risk but the government risk. So this was taxed. And this is also the part of the tax tax gains and tax revenues for the central budget. So yeah, there are a lot of sources, and then we should not forget about this very big fiscal stimulus, which comes from the big deficit and basically from the external funding of this big deficit. As I already mentioned, and I would kind of not stop to emphasize that European support and partner support is the crucial lifeline. Without this financial influx, there will be nothing. There will be no social payments, there will be no teachers' salaries, and it would be impossible to go on.
Yeah, and the financing of the Ukrainian statehood and public services is of critical importance, just like the defense sector. So this 90 billion funding from the EU is indeed something to be aware of how important it is and how also quickly it may go. The war is not expected by most military and defense analysts to end very soon. It is a continuous state of affairs, state of business with the current leadership of Russia that is also seen as nowhere near to end, although Russia is entering some economic hardships finally. We will see about those. But how would you describe in the final closing remarks to this podcast the importance of the support line of the 90 billion, and what should we be planning beyond?
Yeah, 90 billion is very important, and you should be planning beyond, because Russia spends on the military purposes over 150 billion annually, and it does not plan on stopping that. European Union is catching up little by little, and obviously the European Union military spending far grander than the Russian one, but the pace is really scary, and this is why weaponizing Ukraine, giving more weapons, giving more ammo, and this serves the deterrence of Russia. And this is what's most important. And it's not just 90 billion, but I think that even more funds could be directed into that, just to stop the Russian aggression. But again, something asymmetrical should be the thought of. I just wanted to maybe briefly stop on one of your points about the Russian economy. We were speaking about the Russian economy slowing down already, I think, in 2022 when the first sanctions started. And since that, Ukrainians and the peace negotiations obviously as well, right? So these are two topics on which Ukrainians are really skeptical. I mean, when the discussion goes to, okay, Russia will very soon collapse financially, or Trump will come and make a peace agreement. Normally, Ukrainian would say, okay, keep calm and keep your rifle close to your side.
Yeah, there is a lack of a belief that Russia would step away from the direction it is currently pursuing. You were very right to point out that Russian military industry is definitely overproducing in terms of how they prepare for potential ceasefire even, and especially it is seen as a potential danger to other European countries. Finally, well, you should have listened, probably. It's one more time to repeat to many European leaders. But also we will see, and we need to keep fingers crossed for a number of efforts that are currently seen, including in Germany, which is the most potent economically actor in terms of mobilizing the military industrial base and influencing many others across the borders from Germany, including Central Eastern Europe. I think the recent cover story from Foreign Affairs says the unlikely hegemon and discusses this potential without certain doubts about how this may turn out, but that would be a story for another occasion. Thank you, Maria, for stepping into our office and having a discussion about Ukrainian, well, if not resilience, then stubbornness and the spirit and the courage, for which we're also grateful in Poland. And we continue the discussion and what we can do together in Europe and bilaterally.
Thank you, Wojciech, and thank you, Poland, so very much for your support to Ukraine.
And that's all from this week's episode of the Visegrad Insight podcast. bringing you the leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be in touch next week.